There was an empty chair in the front row. Bob Dylan saw it and froze. The Orpheum Theater in Boston. November 1997. A small venue, 400 seats, the kind of room where you could see the lines on a performer's face, hear the breathe between words, feel the weight of silence. Bob Dylan was 76 years old. He'd been touring for 40 years. The never-ending tour, they called it, though Dylan never called it anything. He just played. Night after night. City after city. Small theaters, old clubs, places where the wood remembered other voices, other songs. Tonight was supposed to be like any other night. The house lights dimmed. The small crowd settled into their seats, mostly people in their 50s and 60s, the ones who'd followed Dylan through decades, through transformations, through the years when he was a prophet and the years when he was just a man with a guitar trying to pay his bills. Dylan walked onto the stage alone. No introduction. No fanfare. Just the shuffle of boots on old wood, the creak of the floorboards under his weight. He wore a dark leather jacket, worn at the elbows, jeans, boots that had seen 1,000 stages. His face was weathered, lined with decades of cigarettes and highways and words he'd sung until they stopped meaning what they used to mean. He positioned himself at the microphone. His band waited in the shadows behind him, guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, familiar shapes in the dim light. Dylan reached for his acoustic guitar, lifted the strap over his head, settled the instrument against his body. He looked out at the audience. And that's when he saw it. Front row. Fourth seat from the left. An empty wooden chair with red velvet cushioning. Surrounded by occupied seats on both sides. Conspicuously, impossibly empty. Dylan's hands stopped moving. The guitar hung at his side, forgotten. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes. Those eyes that had seen everything, sung everything, refused to explain anything, fixed on that empty chair with an expression the audience had never seen on Bob Dylan's face before. Recognition. And something deeper. Something that looked like grief finally catching up. Dylan lowered his guitar from playing position, stepped back from the microphone, and for 40 seconds no one in the theater breathed. The band behind him noticed first. The guitarist glanced at the drummer. The bassist leaned forward, trying to see what had stopped Dylan mid-entrance. The keyboard player's hands hovered over the keys, waiting for the cue that never came. The audience felt it next. That collective shift when 400 people simultaneously understand that something is wrong. Not wrong like a technical problem or a forgotten lyric. Wrong like watching someone receive news they'll never recover from. Dylan stood perfectly still. Not the performative stillness of a stage pause. The real stillness of a man who has forgotten where he is because he's somewhere else entirely, trapped in a moment that happened decades ago, but never really ended. 40 seconds stretched into something that felt like minutes. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seats. The Orpheum Theater, which had hosted 10,000 performances over 100 years, held its breath. Finally, Dylan turned his head toward his band. He didn't speak loudly. Didn't need to. The microphone caught it anyway. "Wait," he said. Just that one word. "Wait." Then he walked to the side of the stage and disappeared into the wings. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1963. Bob Dylan wasn't Bob Dylan yet. He was 22 years old, playing coffee houses in Greenwich Village, sleeping on friends' couches, writing songs that were starting to make people nervous because they asked questions the country didn't want to answer. He had a friend named Thomas Garrett. Tommy, everyone called him. A poet who never published anything, a guitarist who played backup for folk singers whose names no one remembers now, a man who believed, truly believed, that art could change the world. Tommy and Bob spent hours in diners and basement apartments, trading verses, arguing about Woody Guthrie and Hank Williams, talking about what songs could do if you built them right. Tommy was older by 5 years, and he treated Bob like a younger brother who might actually make it. "You got something," Tommy would say, cigarette smoke curling around his words. Don't lose it chasing what they want you to be. Stay angry. Stay true. Bob was writing, blowing in the wind, when Tommy got drafted. Vietnam. 1964. Tommy didn't run to Canada. Didn't burn his draft card. He went because he believed in duty, even when he didn't believe in the war. He wrote letters from basic training, from the jungle, letters that got shorter and more abstract as the months passed. Everything's backwards here, one letter said. The songs don't work. Nothing works. Tommy came home in 1966. Physically intact but fundamentally broken in ways that didn't show on X-rays. He moved back to New York, tried to pick up where he'd left off, but the poetry wouldn't come and the guitar felt wrong in his hands. Bob was famous by then. Like a Rolling Stone, had exploded. Newport Folk Festival had exploded. Everything had exploded, and Bob was at the center of it, and Tommy was trying to remember how to sleep through the night without hearing helicopters. They saw each other less. Not because Bob abandoned him. Bob never abandoned anyone, he just drifted, the way smoke drifts, unavoidable and impossible to hold. And Tommy was proud, too proud to call the friend who'd become an icon, too proud to admit he needed help navigating a world that had kept moving while he'd been trying not to die. Bob was on tour in Europe when he got the news. A phone call backstage in Amsterdam. Tommy had been found in his apartment. Pills. The official report said accidental overdose. Everyone who knew him understood it wasn't accidental. Bob didn't go to the funeral. He was contractually obligated to 3 more European dates, and his manager said they couldn't cancel, and Bob was 25 years old and didn't know yet that some contracts matter more than others. He wrote a song instead. Never recorded it. Never played it in public. Just wrote it in a hotel room in Copenhagen, the words coming in that raw, unfiltered way they sometimes did, like Tommy was in the room dictating his own elegy. The song was called The Empty Chair. 3 verses about a friend who went to war and came back as someone else. A friend who sat in coffee houses where they used to argue about Guthrie. A friend whose chair stayed empty long after he was gone. Bob never played it. Not once. It stayed in a notebook, in a box, in storage, moving from apartment to apartment, decade to decade, a song that existed but refused to be heard. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Backstage at the Orpheum, Dylan stood in the dim corridor between the stage and the dressing rooms. His tour manager, a man named Victor who'd been with him for 15 years, approached carefully. Bob? Everything okay? The crowd's waiting. Dylan didn't answer immediately. He was looking at his hands, at the calluses built up over 40 years of pressing steel strings against fretboards. Old hands now. Hands that had written 1,000 songs but couldn't write the one that mattered. That chair, Dylan said quietly. Front row. 4th from the left. Victor's brow furrowed. What about it? Who was supposed to sit there? I don't know. A ticket holder who didn't show, maybe. Or a comp seat that wasn't claimed. Does it matter? Dylan looked at him then, and Victor later said it was like looking at someone seeing through time, seeing all the way back to a version of himself that didn't exist anymore. Yeah, Dylan said. It matters. He walked back toward the stage. Victor called after him, asking if he wanted to delay, if he needed anything, but Dylan was already gone, moving through the wings with that shuffle step he'd developed over decades of entering stages, a rhythm so ingrained it was automatic. He emerged back into the stage lights. The audience rippled with relief and confusion. Dylan returned to the microphone, picked up his guitar again. But he didn't play the opening song they'd rehearsed. Didn't play anything from the setlist his band had memorized. Instead, he adjusted the microphone lower, the way he used to do in the early days when he wanted to speak rather than sing. His voice, rough and weathered like gravel in a tin can, filled the theater. There's a chair out there, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the front row. Empty chair. 4th from the left. I've been seeing empty chairs my whole life. People who should have been there but weren't. People I should have shown up for but didn't. The audience was completely silent. This wasn't a Bob Dylan concert anymore. This was something else. Something unscripted and unrehearsed and dangerous in the way truth is always dangerous. I had a friend once. Dylan continued, his eyes still on that empty chair. Long time ago. Before any of you knew my name. He went to war. Came back different. And I was too busy becoming whatever I was becoming to notice how different. Too busy chasing songs to hear the silence. He paused. Somewhere in the theater someone coughed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He died while I was in Europe. Playing stages. Singing songs about injustice and war and all the things that were wrong with the world. And he died alone because I wasn't there. Because I chose the stage over the chair. Dylan's fingers moved to the guitar strings, not playing yet, just touching them, feeling the metal under his skin. I wrote a song about him once. Never played it. Kept it locked up like that would keep him safe somehow. Like not singing it meant I didn't have to face what it said. Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. He began to play. Slow, deliberate, each note placed with the precision of someone building a cathedral out of sound. The melody was unlike anything the audience had heard from him before, simpler, older, like a hymn that had forgotten its God. And then he sang. There's a chair that sits in coffee houses, where we used to argue Guthrie and the war. But you're not sitting in it anymore. And I keep playing stages like I'm looking for something. But it's just an empty chair I'm looking for. The theater was so quiet you could hear the building settling, the old wood remembering other voices. I was in Amsterdam when they found you. I was singing Revolution to a foreign crowd. While you were finally laying down. The burden we both carried but only you believed in. And I just kept singing loud. People in the audience were crying. Not the cathartic crying of a moving performance. The silent crying of people witnessing someone exhume a grief they'd buried for 34 years. So here's to all the empty chairs. In coffee houses and the wars we didn't fight. To the friends who held the line. While we were chasing glory in the spotlight. Here's to showing up too late. When the song ended, Dylan stood silent for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in 40 years of performing. He walked to the edge of the stage, looked directly at that empty chair, and spoke. Tommy Garrett. 1966. I should have been there. He set his guitar down gently, walked off stage, and didn't return for an encore. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The song was never recorded. Dylan played it only that one night, for that one empty chair, for a friend who'd been gone 34 years. But the people in that theater carried it with them. And they told others. And slowly, quietly, the way Dylan always preferred, the story spread, not as legend, but as truth. In 2003, Dylan established a small, private fund for veterans struggling with PTSD. He never put his name on it. He just made sure Tommy's family knew where it came from. The empty chair taught him something he'd forgotten. Sometimes the most important performance is the one you give to silence. To absence. To the people who should have been there but aren't. Dylan kept touring. He always did. But after that night, he left one chair empty in every venue. Front row. Fourth from the left. For Tommy. For all the Tommies. For everyone who held the line while others held the spotlight.